Welcome to True Crime Talks, where real-life stories of betrayal and murder unfold. Today's case reveals a husband's deadly secret affair. Kevin and Gladys had been married for over a decade and were regarded as a model couple in their suburban community. Kevin, a successful contractor, and Gladys, a devoted school teacher, appeared to have it all: financial stability, a beautiful home, and a seemingly unshakable bond. To their neighbors and friends, their marriage symbolized the perfect partnership, one built on love, trust, and mutual respect. Into their seemingly harmonious world entered Tara, Gladys's niece. Young, vibrant, and full of life, Tara had recently suffered the tragic loss of her parents in a devastating car accident. With no one else to turn to, she moved in with Kevin and Gladys, who welcomed her with open arms. They assured her that their home was now hers too, a safe space where she could rebuild her life and heal from the trauma of her loss. Tara quickly became an integral part of their household, contributing to chores, helping with meal preparations, and even sharing in family traditions. Initially, Tara's presence brought new energy to the home. Her laughter filled the rooms, and her cheerful demeanor provided a refreshing change. Gladys took pride in offering her niece stability, believing that their home could help Tara recover. Kevin, too, was welcoming, though perhaps a little too much so. At first, his attentiveness seemed natural, an older man looking out for a young woman in need. But as the months passed, his interest in Tara grew noticeably more personal. It started subtly, with fleeting glances and compliments that bordered on inappropriate. Kevin began finding reasons to spend more time with Tara, whether it was helping her with small projects or joining her on errands. What seemed harmless at first gradually evolved into a fixation. Tara, still vulnerable from her recent loss, appreciated the attention and misinterpreted Kevin's intentions as genuine care. Behind the closed doors of their home, a dangerous dynamic began to take shape. Kevin's behavior became more emboldened, crossing lines that should never have been approached. Gladys, occupied with her job and trusting her husband implicitly, remained oblivious to the growing tension. To her, Kevin and Tara appeared to have a natural familial bond, and she had no reason to suspect anything sinister lurking beneath the surface. What neither Kevin nor Tara realized was that their clandestine connection would not remain hidden for long. The seeds of betrayal they were sowing would soon blossom into a devastating storm, one that would unravel the seemingly perfect family they had all worked to create. Their actions were setting the stage for a tragedy no one could have foreseen, shattering the illusion of perfection and leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Over time, Kevin and Tara's interactions became alarmingly intimate, far beyond what could be dismissed as innocent or familial. What had started as subtle glances and casual conversations grew into something far darker and more deliberate. Kevin, emboldened by his feelings and blinded by his desires, began finding excuses to spend more time alone with Tara. Whether it was offering to drive her to her college classes or helping her with tasks around the house, he made himself a constant presence in her life. Their encounters, initially casual, soon turned into something unmistakably inappropriate. Kevin would linger near Tara during family gatherings, his gaze following her every move. Late at night, when the rest of the house was asleep, he'd find reasons to meet her in the kitchen or the living room, their whispered conversations growing longer and more personal. Tara, caught between confusion and flattery, found herself drawn into Kevin's web. Still reeling from the loss of her parents, she interpreted his attention as genuine care, unaware of the dangerous boundaries being crossed. Secret text messages became their primary form of communication, a covert lifeline for their forbidden relationship. Kevin would send her messages filled with compliments, promises, and reassurances, and Tara, unsure of how to respond, found herself reciprocating. Soon, their interactions moved beyond the digital realm. Kevin started disappearing from family outings and gatherings, always with a weak excuse that Gladys, preoccupied with her own busy schedule, never questioned. Tara, too, began finding reasons to step away, knowing Kevin would be waiting for her. Kevin's obsession with Tara consumed him, and the strain began to show in his marriage. He became distant and irritable, avoiding Gladys whenever she tried to initiate conversations about their relationship. When she questioned his behavior, Kevin would brush her off, blaming stress from work. Gladys, who had always trusted him implicitly, struggled to understand the sudden change in his demeanor. She dismissed her doubts, convincing herself that her husband was simply overwhelmed and that things would return to normal. Tara, however, was not immune to the growing weight of guilt and fear. She began to realize the consequences of their actions, especially if their secret were to be exposed. Her anxiety grew with each passing day, but her attachment to Kevin kept her trapped in the affair. The pressure of keeping such a dark secret while living under the same roof as Gladys became almost unbearable. As the illicit relationship spiraled further out of control, Kevin and Tara failed to notice the signs that their secret was no longer safe. Gladys, though unaware of the full extent of their betrayal, had begun to sense that something was wrong. She could feel the subtle shifts in the household dynamic, the unspoken tension that seemed to grow with each passing day. It was only a matter of time before her suspicions would lead her to uncover the truth, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change all their lives forever. One afternoon, while cleaning the house, Gladys stumbled upon Kevin's phone left unlocked on the kitchen counter. Normally she would have ignored it, respecting her husband's privacy as she always had, but something compelled her to look this time. Perhaps it was her growing unease, the nagging feeling that something in their marriage was off. As her fingers hesitated over the screen, she told herself it was harmless, just a quick look to ease her mind. What she found shattered her world in an instant. Kevin's phone was filled with explicit messages and photos exchanged with Tara. The words were unmistakable, each one confirming the unthinkable: her husband was having an affair with her own niece. Gladys felt the air leave her lungs as she scrolled through the evidence, her hands trembling. There were dates, times, and even plans for future meetings, all detailed and undeniable. In that moment, shock consumed her, followed quickly by anger. How could Kevin betray her so deeply, and how could Tara, the young woman she had taken in and cared for, repay her kindness with such betrayal? The dual sting of infidelity and family betrayal left her reeling. Gladys felt as if the ground beneath her had crumbled, and she was spiraling into an abyss. That evening, Gladys confronted Tara first, unable to wait for Kevin to return home. She cornered her in the living room, holding the phone as damning evidence. Tara broke down instantly, confessing to everything. Her sobs filled the room as she begged for forgiveness, claiming she never meant for it to happen, and that she had been swept up in Kevin's charm. But her pleas only deepened Gladys's fury. When Kevin arrived home, he found Gladys waiting for him, her eyes blazing with a fury he had never seen before. She threw the evidence at him, demanding answers. Kevin's reaction was cold and defensive. He refused to admit fault, instead blaming Gladys for what he called the deterioration of their marriage. His lack of remorse stunned her. Rather than apologizing or begging for forgiveness, Kevin made it clear he saw himself as a victim, further stoking the fire of her rage. Feeling betrayed and humiliated, Gladys knew she couldn't let the affair go unpunished. Her anger quickly turned into resolve. She decided she wouldn't let Kevin or Tara walk away unscathed, and she began quietly plotting her next move. As Kevin and Tara carried on, oblivious to the storm brewing around them, Gladys steeled herself for what she believed was her only option to take control of the situation in the most decisive way possible. On a cold winter evening, Kevin and Tara planned to meet in secret at an isolated cabin Kevin owned just outside of town. It was a place they had used before to carry on their affair, far away from prying eyes and the looming presence of Gladys. Kevin assured Tara that everything would be fine and that they could finally have a night to themselves. What neither of them knew was that Gladys had discovered their plans. Earlier that day, Gladys had overheard Kevin on a phone call, speaking in hushed tones about the cabin. Her suspicions instantly flared, and she pieced together what he was planning. Consumed by anger and a sense of betrayal that had festered for weeks, she decided this was her moment to act. Gathering what she needed, she left the house hours before Kevin and Tara would depart, heading to the remote cabin. When Kevin and Tara arrived that evening, they were surprised to see the lights already on. Kevin's first thought was that he had forgotten to turn them off during his last visit, but as they stepped inside, their surprise turned to dread. There, seated in the dimly lit living room, was Gladys. She sat in silence, her expression unreadable, a heavy tension filling the room. Kevin froze, his confidence evaporating as he realized they had been caught. Tara, trembling, tried to step back toward the door, but Gladys stood, blocking their escape. In her hand was a heavy wrench she had taken from Kevin's toolbox. Her knuckles were white as she gripped it tightly, her fury radiating from every inch of her being. Gladys didn't yell, her voice cold and steady, cut through the silence as she laid bare her pain, her anger, and her disgust. Kevin attempted to calm her, but his words fell flat, his guilt too obvious. Tara, terrified, pleaded for forgiveness, but her desperation only fueled Gladys's rage. What followed was a blur of violence. Gladys, overtaken by her emotions, lashed out at Kevin first. He tried to defend himself, but the force of her attack left him staggering. Blow after blow fell until Kevin collapsed to the floor, lifeless. Blood pooled beneath him, staining the cabin's wooden floorboards. Tara, panicked, attempted to flee, but in her haste, she tripped over a loose rug, crashing headfirst into the edge of the fireplace. The impact was brutal, and she fell to the ground unconscious, blood streaming from her forehead. As the chaos settled, the cabin grew eerily quiet. Gladys stood amidst the carnage, breathing heavily, the wrench slipping from her grasp. The enormity of what she had done began to sink in, but there was no regret in her eyes. To her, this was justice, a retribution for the betrayal that had destroyed her life. The next morning, neighbors near the remote cabin noticed something unusual. Smoke was rising from the chimney, despite the cabin being rarely used in winter. Concerned that someone might be in trouble, one of them decided to call the authorities. When police arrived, they were greeted by a chilling and horrifying scene that would haunt even the most seasoned investigators. Inside the cabin, Kevin's lifeless body lay sprawled on the floor, his head covered in blood from repeated blows. Nearby, Tara was slumped near the fireplace, her head tilted at an unnatural angle, blood still trickling from the wound she had sustained during her desperate attempt to escape. The air was thick with the metallic scent of blood and the suffocating heat of the fireplace, which Gladys had kept stoked throughout the night. Sitting silently in a rocking chair in the corner of the room was Gladys. Her face was pale and her eyes, glassy and distant, stared into the flickering flames of the fire. She made no attempt to flee or even acknowledge the officers as they entered. Her hand, stained with blood, rested limply on her lap, the wrench lying on the floor beside her. When questioned, she responded with a calmness that unnerved everyone present. Gladys confessed to everything in chilling detail, recounting the affair, her discovery of their plans, and the rage that had driven her to take both lives. The small suburban community was shaken to its core as news of the double homicide spread. Kevin and Gladys had been seen as the picture-perfect couple, and the revelation of Kevin's affair with his niece Tara only deepened the shock. The media descended on the town, eager to cover the salacious details of the crime that seemed ripped from the pages of a twisted novel. Gladys's trial became a spectacle, drawing national attention. The courtroom was packed every day, with people eager to hear her chilling testimony. The prosecution painted her as a cold-blooded killer, while the defense argued she had been pushed to the breaking point by the betrayal of the two people she trusted most. Public opinion was divided. Some saw her as a victim of unimaginable circumstances, while others believed her actions were calculated and unforgivable. Ultimately, the jury found Gladys guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The judge handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole, ensuring she would spend the rest of her days behind bars. The cabin was eventually torn down, but its grim story lingered, becoming part of the town's dark folklore. Kevin, Tara, and Gladys's lives, once entwined by family ties, had unraveled into a tale of betrayal, obsession, and deadly retribution, a haunting reminder of how secrets can destroy even the most seemingly perfect lives.